Do you ever feel overwhelmed at the sheer scale of suffering on factory farms? Or aghast at how normally everybody seems to be behaving while all of this suffering is going on in the background? Or shocked at the acts of cruelty which are endorsed by otherwise kind people in your own life? If so, you might be experiencing Vystopia. The term was coined by psychologist Claire Mann to describe the anguish of being vegan in a non-vegan world. In this video, we're going to explore some of these feelings of Vystopia and look at what we can do when we find ourselves feeling this way. The things we do to animals for food are horrendous. We can imagine the sharp agony of a pig having its tail cut off with no anaesthetic, or the helplessness that sets in after a few days of being in a farrowing crate, or the fear that overcomes them as they can hear and smell pigs dying in the line in front of them. It's awful to imagine that perspective, but you can imagine that perspective of one pig. But if you zoom out and try to think about the 1 million pigs slaughtered in the UK each year, it's just too much to comprehend. The human brain was not built to understand suffering on such a large scale. Psychological research has shown that people are generally insensitive to scale when it comes to emotional stimuli. People are most likely to give to charity when they're told the story of a single starving child. If you add a second starving child to the picture, their willingness to donate on average decreases. It's harder to empathise with a group than it is to empathise with an individual. The larger the group, the more difficult it is to empathise. A similar study in an animal context asked about willingness to donate to save birds affected by an oil spill. The study found no difference between the amount that people were willing to donate to save 200, 2,000 or 20,000 birds. If these people were responding rationally to the difference in scale here, the group who had the opportunity to save 20,000 birds should have been willing to donate 100 times as much as the group who were told they could save 200 birds. But they didn't, they donated the same amount. We simply don't have the hardware to comprehend suffering at this larger scale. That's why it feels so overwhelming to reflect on the scale of factory farming. And that's why when I tell you that we didn't kill 1 million pigs in the UK last year, we actually killed 10 million pigs, you might be shocked, but you probably don't feel 10 times worse. Certainly you probably don't feel 10 million times worse than you did if you were to think about the suffering of a single pig. The human brain is literally not capable of generating an appropriately scaled emotional response to something like factory farming. You can't possibly imagine all of that suffering, you can't emulate it all, you only have one brain. And think about it for a second. Thank God that you can't. Think about the feeling that you have when you see one pig suffering in a farrowing crate, that gut-wrenching feeling of sorrow and hopelessness. Can you imagine what it would even mean to feel 10 million times worse than that? And if your brain did have that capacity, is that a switch you would want to flip, even for a second? This inability to appreciate suffering at scale is a fact about human psychology, but it's not a moral prescription. We can understand rationally that killing 10 million pigs is 10 million times worse than killing one pig, even if we don't feel that way emotionally. It is worth keeping this in mind when thinking about the various different issues which are competing for our attention and resources. If you are somebody who's concerned about farmed animal suffering, it's likely that you're also concerned about human rights issues and global poverty and so on. This is the number of human beings alive on the planet right now, about 8 billion. And this is the number of factory-farmed land animals that we kill for food every year, about 50 billion. 6 times the entire human population every year living out short and brutal lives on factory farms. How bad would any issue affecting these 8 billion humans have to be before it came close to the suffering experienced by these 50 billion animals? Well, the answer to that is ultimately subjective, but for me, it's difficult to imagine something that would inflict enough suffering on 8 billion humans to come close to the suffering experienced every year by the 50 billion factory-farmed land animals. There's a couple of useful things we can take from this. The first is that the scale here in the issue of factory farming really does dwarf most other issues. And the second is, as a matter of human psychology, when communicating with people and trying to persuade them of veganism, you're probably not best to mention the 50 billion animals. Instead, talking about the suffering of one particular factory-farmed pig is likely to be more emotionally resonant. Why is everybody acting like this? You will come across people who understand that this is a moral emergency and are on the same journey as you trying to help these animals. Unfortunately, that's not common. There are 3 types of responses you're likely to encounter before you get there. First, they ignore you. This is probably the most common response to animal advocates. People know that they can just look the other way. They don't want to change what they eat, and they don't want to feel bad about what they like eating, and they know that they can get away with doing neither if they just avoid animal advocates. And they're right. These people are usually not being malicious. In their mind, they just have a busy life, they're concerned with their issues, they've been told vaguely that vegans are these crazy extremists, and they just don't feel a need to engage. Second, they laugh at you. Our culture likes to pretend that vegans are the butt of a joke that everybody else is in on. But what's the joke? There's this vague sense that vegans have got it wrong and they're worthy of derision and mockery because, well, the real reason comes down to a well-documented psychological phenomenon called do-gooder derogation. People are motivated to derogate people they see as do-gooders in order to maintain their own moral self-perception. Personally, I've always found it a bit strange that do-gooder would be a pejorative. I mean, think about it. Do-gooder. One who does good. Isn't that good? Well, the reason that people don't tend to think so is because they're hearing it as do-gooder than me. That would be do better than me. It's the same reason I might decide I dislike my neighbour when they get a fancy new car. It's petty moral jealousy coming from people who have decided that your animal advocacy is not really about helping animals, but it's actually all about them. And so now they need to let you know, and let themselves know, that you're not actually better than them. You are, but that's not the point here. The point is just to understand where that mockery is coming from, so that you can help to contextualize it and deal with it. Third, they fight you. Usually not physically, but people will go to the ends of the earth to argue in defense of some horrendous things done to innocent animals. Why? Well, they're engaged in what's called motivated reasoning. That's to say, they already know the conclusion that they want to end up at, that they can carry on eating as much meat as they want to, and they're going to work backwards to get to premises which can lead them there. The people at the fighting stage are usually the closest to seeing things your way, and that's why they struggle the hardest. The people ignoring or laughing at you are safe at a distance, imagining that they have a coherent defense of factory farming. But the people who are ready to fight you about it are those closest to realizing that they don't. As a vegan, it's worth knowing how to interact with each of these types of people. For the ignorers, do what you can to get them to stop ignoring you. Advocate for the animals as if you were one of them. Be as patient as you would be if you were a pig on day 3 in the farrowing crate asking to be let out. Don't let them ignore this suffering. For the jokers, get specific. I mean, ask them to explain what exactly is the joke here. What's the funny part? Is it the part where they cut off the pig's tail without any painkillers or clip their teeth? Maybe it's the part where they're kept in farrowing crates, or the part where they're killed in gas chambers. What is the funny part that we're supposed to be laughing at? If they find that response uncomfortable, then good. It is kind of uncomfortable that those people are joking about those horrendous things. If they don't find it uncomfortable, well, you can just keep goading them to endorse and laugh about more and more specific acts of cruelty to animals, and know that anybody looking at that interaction is going to find it very hard to sympathise with that person. And that includes the person themselves when they look back on the interaction later. For the fighters, be patient. If they're past ignoring you, they're past laughing at you, and now they're fighting you, that means you're close to winning. I mean it, these people will frustrate you the most, but they are the closest to understanding. Just keep your cool with them, keep explaining your view to them, and keep pressing the issue as much as your relationship with them can stand. It is very likely that they're going to engage in motivated reasoning and get to silly conclusions like maybe animals don't feel pain, or maybe plants do feel pain. Be patient. They normally have to work through some stuff over time. It's usually at least 24 hours before somebody realizes that they're wrong in this kind of situation, so the argument might be drawn out over days, weeks, or months. One of the hardest things to deal with when you're suffering from Vystopia is non-vegan friends and family that are close to you. Once you feel the moral urgency to reduce animal suffering on factory farms, watching the people that you love being complicit in that suffering can be heartbreaking. Personally, I think there is a balance to be struck here. Obviously, you have an interest in maintaining your positive relationships. Being around this person and just pretending that you think that what they're doing is fine is not being honest to them, it's not being honest to yourself, and it's not helping animals. Ideally, you want a situation where you can maintain a positive relationship, but not give the person any illusions that you think what they're doing is okay. Social pressure from the people around us is absolutely key to the process of individuals eventually going vegan. Don't underestimate your influence on your parents, your kids, your spouse. The more you speak up, the more others around you will change. But there's very often at least one person who's very stubborn and very resistant to change. So how can you maintain a positive relationship with this person when they're determined to continue their support of factory farming? The best approach is not spending hours going round in circles arguing with someone who's very unlikely to change their view. Instead, save all of that energy and attention and direct it somewhere where it can make a real impact in helping animals. You might even do this in a way which is connected to the individual that you're concerned about. For example, you could say to somebody, look, I'm now giving to this vegan charity specifically to cancel out the effect of you not going vegan. At the very least, this is going to show them that suffering on factory farms is an issue that you take really seriously. And in the best cases, it might prompt them to reflect on whether they ought to be doing something that their relatives feel they have to compensate for. Remember, this is not about you or the people in your life. It's about the animals. And from the perspective of the animals, they don't know or care which human is going to eat them after they've been slaughtered. One of the worst things that you can do as an animal advocate is to allow all of your energy and passion to be absorbed by one stubborn person in your life. Instead, take all of that energy and direct it in a way which is much more productive and helps thousands of animals. Vystopia describes the agony of being vegan in a non-vegan world. You might feel overwhelmed by the scale of the suffering, because we lack the cognitive hardware to process suffering on this larger scale. You might feel aghast that everybody else seems to either ignore, mock, or justify the suffering, and that's a result of motivated reasoning. And you might feel shocked that people in your life are complicit in or supportive of this violence. But you shouldn't let those stubborn individuals absorb all of your attention. Incomprehensible suffering that everybody defends, including your loved ones. All of this can lead to a feeling of hopelessness and depression. So how can we deal with this? Well, you could try to distract yourself with other things, try to enjoy normal activities, try to plug back in and go back to sleep like everybody else. But where would that leave the animals? Even if you managed to put up the blinders for the rest of your life, Billions of animals don't have that choice. If you've come this far, you are part of a fraction of the population who cares this much. If the people who come this far decide to turn back and switch off, we will never end factory farming. If anyone who comes this far decides to go a little further, they can cancel out all of the suffering on factory farms caused by the non-vegan friends and family in their life, and start to engage with the issue in a way that not only helps animals, but helps them to feel more in control. And if all of the people who come this far decide to go further, and decide to share this video with their vegan networks, we can completely change the game for animals. To find out exactly what you can do to help far more animals than the meat eaters in your life can possibly hurt, go and check out my video Upgrade to Vegan 2.0 now. This is Chris Bryant, PhD. Cheers.